This video is to help you with the straddle handstand. It's a little bit of a tricky position, but because bringing the feet down lowers your center of gravity, it actually makes it easier to balance the handstand. When your feet are way up high, you're a big long lever, and so every little movement is going to really try to tip you over. So as you get comfortable being in the straddle position, you'll actually find that it's a really good way to help you build up your endurance and build confidence in some longer holds and really learn how to create stability. So let's take a look at some positions here and go over what's happening when we actually balance the straddle handstand. So here you can see in the handstand on the left, I'm bringing the feet down, and on the right you can see a little more clearly that I'm actually creating a pike in my hips. So the shoulders arch through the back up into the hips, and the hips tilt over past the shoulders towards the finger side, while the feet come down to the palm side with a lot of tension in those hip flexors. On the floor, maybe a little easier to see, I'm going to straddle out without piking my hips, and that's going to arch my back and shorten the width of my straddle. Now what I want to do is straddle and pike at the same time. So I'm holding my legs as wide as possible, but I'm also using the strength of my hip flexors to pull my legs down towards the floor and create that nice pike shape. Of course, we can go a little bit too far with pulling the hip flexors down. You can see here I round the lower back, and that's actually going to push too much weight into my palms and either cause me to push the shoulders forward and planche, or perhaps just lose balance and have to come down from that handstand. So we want to make sure that we only straddle and pull the feet down so far as to keep the hips on the ground when we're practicing this drill, or if we're in the handstand, then we want to focus to keep the arch in our back and keep the hips on the finger side, the back side of the handstand. In terms of how exactly we straddle, we want to externally rotate when we straddle. And so you can see here that I'm just straddling straight out to the sides, and it's a decent straddle, but it's not quite as wide as if I were to start that straddle with a nice strong external rotation like you'll see on this one. You can see the legs turn out a little bit, and that's going to put tension in my glutes, while I also actively squeeze my quads to lock the knees tightly and keep the calves tight with a nice strong toe point with the toes curled over the top. So that external rotation really adds a lot of tension and stability to the handstand. Here you can see just a front and back view of the handstand, not perfectly symmetrical with my hips, but actively straddling out as wide as I can, keeping the legs tight. You can see the muscle flexing. You can see that my toes are pointed. And from the side, you can see that as I straddle, the shoulders don't move. We want to keep the shoulders perfectly stacked over the hands in the same position. And as we straddle, allow the hips to move towards the finger side, the back side. And as we bring the legs back together, the hips are going to slightly come back into that vertical alignment. So it's a little bit of a hip shift to counterbalance the amount of feet movement that we have. If you have a very wide straddle, if you're a ballerina and you have a tremendously wide straddle, then this amount of hip movement will be less pronounced. If you're pretty tight like me, then you're going to have to push your hips over a little further like you see here in this video. So hopefully this gives you some good ideas and some conceptual knowledge about the straddle handstand. Obviously anything like this, it's easier to learn how to do it just from a informational standpoint than to actually put it into practice and learn to do it. But I find that if you understand some of the ideas around how and why you're doing the exercises, it really helps you to work towards it, especially when you video yourself and review your training. You can kind of compare it to other handstands with people who are more advanced and start to see the differences and work your way towards those better positions. So the key ideas that you want to keep in mind are: keep the shoulders stacked over the hands, straddle as wide as possible with strong external rotation, and keep the low back slightly arched so that we don't start to pull the hips back over the palms and pull ourselves back to the floor. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please share it with your friends who are into handstands, and stay tuned for more information and ideas about how to develop your handstand practice.